Hello and welcome to Stuart Saturday Live, Season 2, Episode 9, our September show. This month is extra special for me as I'll be turning 40 at the end of the month, hence the tiara today. And I got myself a little something. I'm wearing a 17th century cross, which I recently bought at auction. I think it goes really well with my 17th century ring. Yeah, I'm just looking forward to things, and I might be going to Stratford upon Avon for my birthday weekend, which I'm really looking forward to. Well, let's see. I was a guest on That Shakespeare Life, and it was a pleasure to chat with Cassidy Cash about fleas during the late Tudor and early to mid Stuart periods. The link for that episode is available on my social media and under this video on the YouTube channel. So do check that out if you can. I so enjoyed having my friend, historian Mark Turnbull, join me last month to talk about Prince Rupert of the Rhine and our experience with the Stuart History Festival. During that show, however, I noticed I was experiencing brain fog, among other things, and I ended up going to the hospital. Since then, I've had to deal with some more health issues, which fortunately are being treated, but I'm on the waiting list for something else. So we'll see how that goes. But I was lucky to have some of my family come over from the USA to spend a bit of time with me, and that I'm really grateful for that. My nephew visited first, followed by some of our family from the Stirling area of Scotland. And then my sister Millie and her husband Joe came over for a brief visit from New Jersey. And Millie even got dressed up and we recorded a cookery segment using apples from my garden and a recipe from the 1650s. All being well, that will be featured in an upcoming show. So thank you, Millie, for being such a good sport. And Joe's a great guy, and he took me to the GP and everything. So I'm really grateful for that. And I'm really grateful to have been able to spend some time with them all, especially with my mum. Well, enough about me. It's time to introduce our very special guests. And it's the first time we'll have two guests on at the same time. So if we have any technical issues, do be kind. I've really been looking forward to this chat. Nadine Akkerman is Professor of Early Modern Literature and Culture at Leiden University and is the author of Invisible Agents, Women and Espionage in 17th Century Britain. And she also wrote what is considered by many, including myself, to be the authoritative biography of the sometime Queen of Bohemia, Elizabeth Stuart, daughter of James VI and I and Anna of Denmark. Dr. Pete Langman is an editor, academic, OED bibliographer, and guitarist. He has a PhD on Francis Bacon, the most interesting one in my opinion. He is the author of the novel Killing Beauties and is the editor of Negotiating the Jacobean printed book. Joining us live from a secret location in the wilds of Oxfordshire, please welcome Professor Akkerman and Dr. Langman. Welcome to you both.
Hello.
Hello.
Thank you
Hello.
for having us.
Oh, it's so lovely to have you on the show. I've been a fan for many years, and I've got most of your books. so it's a real pleasure and honor to have you here. I really would love to know what first sparked your interest in history, perhaps 17th century history in general. And it's a question for both of you, please.
Can I start?
You can start, yes.
For me, it started in 2002 when I was embarking on a PhD on Elizabeth Stuart, that sometime Queen of Bohemia. Many will know her as the Winter Queen, but we should definitely call her Queen of Hearts instead. I started my PhD in English literature, and I was hoping to
Oh,
uncover theatrical networks because she was known to be in touch with authors of the period, and she was still alive when Shakespeare was around, and so we assumed that she would have written a lot on ballet performances, plays, and that I could sort of dive into a literary network. And it turned out to be the case that many unknown letters didn't touch upon authors or plays at all, only upon battles and waging war and diplomacy. So I was dragged into the 30 Years' War and basically had to retrain myself as a historian to finish that PhD.
Wow, that's amazing. That's a great story. Thank you.
So my
And
story
Pete?
is perhaps a little more prosaic. I was doing a course on Francis Bacon in the third year of my English literature again
Mhm.
degree, and Lisa Jardine, I don't know whether you know the name.
Yes.
She second marked one of my essays and decided I was going to do a PhD on Francis Bacon. And anyone who knew Lisa will know that once she decided something was going to happen, there was no point in trying to say no. So I just kind of, that was it really. I was done. I've been ever since.
Wow, oh, that's brilliant. And it's funny how you both had this interest in English literature. I'd like to know who are your favorite authors going into those degrees? I mean, what you know, I think most people have a favorite or two.
Yeah, so, well, when I was going into the a kind of bachelor and masters as well, I was very much orientated on the big names: Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, John Donne. I still love all those authors, but during my studies, I became particularly interested in women authors and
Mhm.
trying to find them. When I was studying
Right.
myself, I still had to go to another university. I was studying in Amsterdam. There were hardly any women authors on the course list, so I went to Utrecht, a nearby university, to study Margaret Cavendish, for instance. Um,
Oh,
so
wow.
it's, and she's of course great, but there are so many more. Yeah, there's, it's a feast now.
It's true. It's true.
Yeah,
I
that's
was
brilliant.
I
Yeah.
was much more 19th century based, I suppose, before I went to university. And it was at
Hmm.
university I discovered. I mean, I obviously knew Shakespeare, and I'd studied him at A level and all that kind of nonsense, but slightly different thing. But it was at university I started discovering the early modern period and just found it fascinating. And then, of course, Bacon happened, and that was, like I said, that was kind of all over for me.
Wow. And it's funny. I do mention this sometimes, but it's it's funny how you mentioned Margaret Cavendish. Um, just outside my window is Bolsover Castle, and so she's connected with that. So this area of northeast Derbyshire has a lot of respect for Margaret, and I think that's lovely to know that you were interested in her too. Um, but let's talk a bit about your book, Invisible Agents, and I've got that right here. Lovely book, and um, it's just so interesting. And this was published by Oxford University Press, and it it really is a remarkable study, and it's been so useful for my work too. So it's just it's it's been really wonderful as all of your work has been. And I'd like to know if you could please tell us what she intelligencers were. What were intelligencers for those who are just new to these subjects, please?
Yeah, so this really was the kind of first book on women spies,
Hmm.
um, but there was no such thing. The word spy in the period is hardly ever used. It is used, but it's still in kind of rare cases. So you can't go into the archives looking for women spies using those search terms because you won't find them. So I came across the term she intelligencer in pamphlets, and that was used in a negative sense to dismiss them. Women in the period were seen as untrustworthy. They were just gossipy creatures, so you certainly shouldn't use them as spies. But a lot of royalists, especially, worked with women. So I embraced the term to and used it in a positive sense in my book to refer to those women working in a dangerous trade. So women who gathered secret information or disseminated that kind of information with the kind of purpose to use it. So it's different from just news gathering. This was meant to fuel political action, for instance, during times of civil war. So an intelligencer is a kind of a creature between a messenger, ambassador, and secretary. It's a person dealing in secret information.
Wow, that's really fascinating. And I encourage everyone to look into these topics that we'll be talking about in further detail and read the books, and you'll learn so much. It's an amazing subject. Speaking of she-intelligencers, Pete, I had the privilege of reading an advanced review copy of your novel, Killing Beauties, a few years ago, and it was published in 2020. As I stated in the review, it is a pacey, visceral, and thrillingly dark tale of a daring she-intelligencer who risks everything for her loyalty to her king. Could you please tell us what inspired you to write the novel, and what was the process like?
Well, the inspiration was Invisible Agents. It's quite straightforward. When Nadine was writing it, when she found Susan Hyde, and you forgot the other one's name now.
Diana Jennings.
Diana
That's
Jennings.
Because these women use so many code names. You sometimes forget their real names.
When she found them and she was looking into their stories, I noticed that, I mean, it was really exciting, and I hadn't really known of anyone writing about these people before. But what I noticed is that there were little bits of history where we had lots of information about what they were doing, and then these great big gaps where they disappeared. So they suited perfectly writing into a novel form, because you had these stepping stones of reality that you could use as a frame, and then between them you could do kind of whatever you wanted, as long as you managed to get to the next stepping stone. So it was just a really inspiring way to write. And also these, I mean, especially Diana Jennings, is just such a loon. It's just such a fantastic woman going out and doing all sorts of crazy things. And it's the kind of person you read about and you think, no, they were just making this up. But actually it was really quite out there for that time. She was quite outside the loop, really. Writing it was just like writing any book. You spend a lot of time thinking, you spend a lot of time reading, and then you eventually reach critical mass and you see a kind of a pathway through the story, and you write it down as quickly or as slowly as you like, and then you spend a lot of time editing it and a lot of time talking about it and trying to make it work. So it's just kind of putting in the hours.
Well, right. Well, it certainly did work. I still regard it as it was one of the best books I read at the time, and still I still think of it quite fondly. Yeah. And I wonder, are you going to write more fiction, perhaps? Is that something you might do? And or maybe I shouldn't ask that. No, I don't know.
I couldn't possibly say, because then I might have to kill you.
Oh yes, I see. Of course. Right. Well, as you mentioned, one of the main characters is Susan Hyde, and she was a real person who lived an extraordinary life, and she was also the subject of one of the chapters in your book, Nadine, Invisible Agents. Do we know more about Susan? I mean, is there something perhaps you could tell the audience about her? And because we know mostly about her brother, Edward Hyde, don't we? We tend to know more about him.
Yes. I think Susan was one of these women I found in the archives, and nobody had really written anything about her. And at first, I didn't know it was the sister of Edward Hyde, the later Earl of Clarendon. I sort of followed the same steps as the spy master who caught her, Oliver Cromwell's spy master, John Thurlow. So I'd looked at all the letters he intercepted, and I was piecing together the same kind of information. And like him, I reached the conclusion after reading 20 or so letters that this is the sister of Edward Hyde, and her name was revealed because she was betrayed in the end. So she was Susan Hyde, the sister of Edward, and I thought, okay, this is actually also fantastic that she has such a well-known connection, because also we of course know that Edward Hyde wrote the history of the rebellion, the first kind of history of the period.
Yes.
I assumed he recruited Susan to work for the secret royalist organization, the Sealed Knot, and she was in direct contact with Charles II, trying to organize a royalist rising. And I thought Edward must be really proud of his sister. He must sort of written about her, but he completely ignores her in the history of the rebellion. So it became a kind of mystery to piece together. And what is so horrendous about this story is that she's one of the few women whom we know died because of the dangerous trade. She was imprisoned in Lambeth prison, which at the time only housed men. She was thrown in, her clothes were ripped from her body, and 2 weeks later she is dead. And friends take her away and bury her. So we knew nothing about her, and we have this kind of famous brother who also tries to keep things quiet. So it was a kind of a mystery story which I unraveled in Invisible Agents.
Didn't she also vanish from the archives at one point?
Yes, but this is it, yes.
Oh.
So when I started to write up the story, I wanted to revisit the archival documents again in the Bodleian Libraries in Oxford, where we have the archives of John Thurlow. And they couldn't produce the file at some point, and it fortunately reappeared after a month or so, but it was missing. So
oh dear.
Yes, that was a scary moment, I must say.
Oh gosh. But I can imagine that this sort of thing is extremely thrilling when you're on the case and you're piecing together this mysterious figure and their life and everything. I mean, I suppose that you must have a sense of being, you are an investigator, and it's amazing. I think that this is the sort of stuff that might one day be made into a film. This academic investigating the story of the past. I think it's really interesting, and I think you've uncovered a great deal, and it's wonderful. So I commend you for that.
Thank you.
But I also think it's interesting about Susan that her brother's granddaughters would become queens. We have Mary II and Anne, and yet for so long we didn't know much about Susan and all these peripheral figures who were so involved in the bringing about the monarchy back, during the Restoration, all that stuff. There are lots of figures involved. So it's interesting how it all works. But there is another figure who is a bit more well known. I mean, we have Aphra Behn, and she's known for her plays such as The Rover. This portrait is via the Yale Center for British Art. Now, I understand there is some debate about whether she was a spy or not. So what do you think?
I don't think there is a debate whether she was a spy, but she certainly turned into something else. This is before her literary career started, right? So we have her being recruited for the Royalists. It's 60-66. We're in the middle of the Second Anglo-Dutch War, and she goes to Antwerp. And we have her instructions of a kind of a semi-professional secret service at the time, by Lord Harlington, we know what she was supposed to do. She was supposed to turn a spy, William Scott. He might have been her lover in an earlier life, so that's she might have gotten a way in. But the interesting thing which I found is that she indeed writes intelligence reports in the beginning. But there is a point where William Scott is no longer around, and yet she pretends that he is, and that he's telling her all kinds of juicy tidbits of information. But I think she is just at that point really starting her literary career. She is fabricating the voice of Scott. So as soon as you're being paid for information, spies have an incentive to make up that information and to make that more interesting. And that's certainly what she did at the end of her Android trip. She was just fabricating information.
I think there are two interesting points to be made here on top of this. One is that there's a feeling that she has to have her information come from a male source, because it's more authoritative than coming from a woman. So she may not necessarily be fabricating it. Certainly there is a kind of, they wouldn't have paid so much attention to it if she was writing from in her own voice. And the other thing is that she's in competition with another spy who also wants to get William Scott. So they're effectively trying to turn him, whoever turns him gets the reward. So this kind of reinforces the idea that, certainly, I mean, before so in kind of late Elizabethan, early Tudor times, and early Stuart times, that there was no real centralized intelligence agency, and a lot of the spies were competing against each other, and the spy masters were competing against each other. So it's not necessarily as efficient as it could have been, which of course leads people to do things like write in somebody else's voice.
Right. Wow. Well, it's all very interesting. It's nice to consider all these, aspects. But of course, there were many plots and intrigues during the Stuart period, including the infamous Gunpowder Plot of 1605. Here we have the famous Monteagle letter from October 1605, and this image is from the National Archives in Kew, by the way. This anonymous letter, which warned Lord Monteagle that something big was going to happen, is what led to the discovery of the Gunpowder Plot. And that plot sought to blow up the House during the state opening of Parliament on the 5th of November, killing the king and several members of his family and all members of Parliament present, among others. So what sort of intrigues were going on here as this was happening? I mean, this is a very famous letter, and I wonder if you could tell us about, the spies or the intelligencer community at this time during the plot as it unfolded.
Yes. So we're in 1605 in November when this is uncovered. So James the Sixth has become James the First. He's been on the throne since 1603. And he has Elizabeth I, one of Elizabeth I's spy chiefs is still there, Robert Cecil. And as you say, it is this letter that happens to uncover the plot completely by accident. It's not Cecil's spy network. Again, most of these things are still uncovered by accident. But Cecil has, of course, a network of spies, and he uses those men to see whether there are any further conspirators. They catch Catesby and Guy Fawkes, of course, who had meant to abduct little Elizabeth Stuart, a 9-year-old girl at the time, and make her a puppet Queen of England. That was the plan behind the Gunpowder Plot, as well as blow up all the male heirs and James while they were sitting in Parliament. But he using his spies to see, have we really called All the Conspirators. And they do that through a figure. And they let him communicate with other conspirators, or whom they hope are other conspirators.
Ah,
So
wow.
they end up letting him have a written conversation in invisible ink with Anne Vokes, who's a Catholic gentlewoman who's a great supporter, obviously, of the Catholic cause, and puts up a lot of Catholics, and she's kind of most wanted woman in England at the time, even though they're not too worried about her really, but because they think that she'll connect them to everything else. So they've got this correspondence going backwards and forwards. Firstly, when she's outside prison and he's in the tower, and then eventually they catch her and stick her in the tower as well, and they let them carry on writing to each other. And so when they're writing to each other, they of course picking up the letters and opening them and reading them, because they can. That's the whole point. They're trying to observe the conversation. But the problem that they have, and this kind of goes into the spycraft territory, is that because the actual messages they're sending are written in invisible ink, if they reveal the invisible ink, it stays revealed, which of course means that you have destroyed the conversation, unless you can work out a way of counterfeiting a letter which is written in real ink and invisible ink, that will fool the person who's receiving it, thinking that it's written by the person that they think it's written by.
Wow.
And one of their operatives, who at this point has retired, is brought back because he says that he has a way of doing it, and he actually figures out a way of counterfeiting letters written in invisible ink. So what he's doing is he's managing to copy the handwriting in an ink that you can't see. And it's hard enough to do with an ink that you can see, but doing it when you can't see what you've actually done is really, really hard. So
I can imagine. Wow.
He's figured out a way of doing this, which is quite astonishing.
Yes.
Clever boy.
Yes, it's very clever. I mean, I really like to write with quill and ink, you know. I don't know if either of you like that, but I still find it really, really fun. But I've never tried doing any invisible ink.
Oh, you should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things we did with investigating SPYCRAFT is whenever there was a technique which wasn't harmful to anyone, we tried to do it ourselves. So any invisible ink we try to make. It's not just lemon juice, but you have copperas, you have alum, which you can use as invisible inks. And we also give recipes, instructions how to do it yourself at the end of the book. So people can have a bit of fun.
Yes, and yes, go ahead.
When we were looking at ciphers, there was a thing called a cipher wheel that some people use to make life easier. And so we made one. So we made a cipher wheel. And if you go to the Yale website and look at the SPYCRAFT book where it's on sale, there's a download, a PDF that you can download, which has all these different wheels, so that you can put different alphabets in. You can put this one, you can put your own alphabet in, so that you can make your own cipher wheel. It's great fun.
Yes, well, I pre-ordered your book right away as soon as I found out. And this is the book, everyone. This is the hardback. And it proved to be extremely popular in this house because especially my 8-year-old, because this is glow in the dark.
Yep.
And she really liked that. Yes, so we had to keep it in the sun for a bit and then put it out in the dark. So it was very, very popular with everyone. But it has just so much information and lovely color photos, and it's just jam-packed with really interesting information. So it's good, really good. Let's see. So it's mainly about the espionage, this very dangerous trade from the time of Elizabeth I to the Restoration. What were some of the tools and techniques used by spies during the period to send information? I mean, Pete, you showed us the cipher wheel that you have made. So let's see.
Yeah, the many different techniques. So it's indeed about the materiality. What did spies have in their hands? Not so much even the stories you can tell by looking at their techniques, but actually, what does it mean to forge a letter? So there is forgery of documents. We mentioned the use of mixing all kinds of invisible inks. They used all kinds of code, which is called cryptography. And to overcome the problem of people immediately noticing that you are using codes because symbols and little squiggles or numbers stare you in the face if you open a letter. They also worked with code, which was steganography, it's hiding in plain sight. When we, for instance, agree that we send a shopping list, but 12 gloves from Paris actually means the army will invade Newcastle.
Wow.
So
that's
you have
so cool.
a kind of domestic talk.
There was one I seem to remember that had Walsingham down as the merchant's wife.
Yes, for instance. little tricks with gender as well.
Right. Oh, it's so cool. So ciphers were used as you mentioned, and we have a few images of them. And let's see if we can get them up. Yes. Oh, this is very elaborate.
That's a little cipher wheel, and it's 2 discs. And basically you can sort of agree that we set the disk, the index A on a certain symbol, and then you know how all the letters are being ciphered. I can't properly read this.
The other
this
great
one
thing
is
the cipher wheel there is that the portal one is actually in the book. It's stitched in so that you can use it. So they have the little cipher wheel there so that you can actually make your own cipher wheel, and that's so the string allows you to actually physically use it. So that's kind of fun.
Oh, cool.
Sorry. So this one here.
This is a reconstruction, and even though it's not a Stuart cipher, I think it's a really handy one because it allows us to say how cipher keys in the Stuart period also still function.
It was a Stuart cipher. Mary Stuart.
Yes, Mary Stuart. This is the cipher that brought down Mary, Queen of Scots, and this is how the message would have looked. Where part of it was enciphered. But if we can have that previous image again, yeah, perfect. Then you can see that this is basically how any cipher of the period would have worked. You would have a substitution alphabet, and we can see it in the first 2 rows here. A is a symbol, little O, I think, and B is what looks like a 4 or a little cross, and C is a kind of open triangle, etc. Then there are things which is throwing off the person who tries to break the cipher. You have nulls, which are symbols which do not mean anything. Or you have a doublet, which you can use to double a letter, which is very handy for the M or the N or the L. Because if you would have 2 symbols that are the same, a person would immediately think, oh, in English, that's probably an N or an M or an L. And then a list of code words, which is called the nomenclator. And we have and is a cipher here, and for and with and that. Common words which you then put in a symbol for. And that list of code words could well go into the hundreds. So there are very complicated cipher keys where this list is very much longer.
One of the things that we really encourage people to do, and we've done it ourselves, this is why we encourage people to do it, is to take for example, the next line of cipher, which is using this key, and translate it, decode it, and see how long it takes, and then encode it, and see how long it takes, and see how difficult it is not to make a mistake. Because one of the things that we noticed more and more as we're working on SPYCRAFT, is that people in history books have a tendency to say, "Oh, an X deciphered this," as if they did it in about 20 minutes. And it
Yeah.
takes an inordinate quantity of time. Even with a simple cipher, it takes a long time. With the more complex ones, it's really difficult. And we've got loads of examples of people saying, you know what, this is just taking too long. I can't be bothered, or they just couldn't do it. It was too difficult, so it just kept going wrong. And so
Right.
you end up as a spy when you're using this in the field. You have to make a cipher that is good enough to stop the enemy from cracking it too quickly, but also not so difficult that it's impossible for the people you're sending it to decode it in time.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know, this really makes me think. Sometimes, you know, with paleography, uh, I have quite a lot of documents that I have, and I find it very difficult sometimes. You know, depending on the handwriting of that's present, and sometimes it takes me a few days, a few weeks. I was wondering, and that's just straightforward letters or indentures and something like that. But how long, you know, did it typically take you to, you know, understand what they were trying to say in these things? I mean, you said there's a simple and there's a complex one. What were the times involved in that, please?
Yes, so you end up having the same problems as the master code breakers of the
Ooh,
period. But some things are rudimentary and can be broken. So I've broken several codes myself for Elizabeth Stuart, who was also a keen user of cipher codes, and that use sometimes it's an afternoon, sometimes it's a week, and there are still codes that haven't been broken yet.
wow.
Um, Sometimes these things are built up in a logical fashion. For instance, if you have a code list, you think about King James obviously being the highest person, he could also be the highest number. And the second highest
Ah,
number would then be Anne of Denmark, and the third highest would then be Charles the First, or Charles, Prince Charles, etc. So it's sometimes a logical build-up. But if they are trying not to give numbers but symbols, it's harder to sort of estimate whether King James is really the son, or but what is that little squiggle. There's not a kind of logical build-up if you start working with symbols. So there's a code Elizabeth Stuart used with Sir Balthasar Gerbier,
mhm.
which I only managed to decode for for the alphabet and not so much the code list. So if people want to help me, please, I would still love to know what that code actually says.
Well, I mean,
Oh,
even Thomas Philippes, who was one of Walsingham's code breakers, worked for Walsingham. He said that one of the Spanish codes took him 20 days
whoa.
to
Wow.
and he was a serious specialist. He was probably the best code breaker we had, certainly at the time.
Wow.
And that's no mean feat. It's a long time.
Right. I think I read in your book that Elizabeth Stuart usually wrote in French to her brother. Is that correct? Or to, yeah.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
mostly.
Right. So you do speak several languages, don't you? I mean, does that help to be multilingual? That that must be helpful
Yes,
for something
well,
like this.
I've certainly I, it's not. I read several languages. I wouldn't sort of say that
Oh,
I
okay.
speak them all properly, but I certainly read them.
Right.
But it's yeah, of course, it's one of the codes could just simply be a foreign language. If you start working with frequency analysis,
Hmm.
it's you know that the most frequently used letter in English is a vowel, probably the A or the E, the E.
Hmm.
Definitely the E.
So
Wow.
it's. But would you also know that for Polish or Latin? So as soon as people start playing with languages, it becomes much more difficult.
Wow. That's pretty neat. Um, yeah, I find especially with language as it's changed throughout the centuries. Um, I I speak Spanish too, and English, but I find that the Spanish is different as the English is as well. So there are differences to, take into consideration as well, with these old documents. Yeah.
This, of course, you also need to remember that in certain situations, like during the Babington plot, when Mary Queen of Scots was in Chartley, when she was writing, when a coded letter came out of there to Babington, it had been basically dictated in French by Mary to her secretaries. Her secretaries then translated it into English or Scots, and then encoded it. So there's these kind of multiple steps, which of course is the whole point, because what Mary wanted to do is make sure that there was no possible way that anything that was written down could be comprehensively said, this is her voice, because it's been so many times divorced from her. But it does also mean it takes an awfully long time.
Right.
And so there's the whole story about when she gets the message from Babington. He says, shall I do it then? And the message going out saying, yeah, go on, doesn't leave for 6 days, and everyone says, oh, she was prevaricating, she didn't know what to do, she was hesitating. It's like, no, she wasn't hesitating, she knew exactly what to do. It just took a long time to get all this stuff together. And actually say that the secretaries actually say that they'd say to Babington, thanks for the letter, it's going to be a while before we get back to you, because we've got to decode this, translate it, encode it again, blah blah blah.
Wow.
So it won't be released next Thursday.
It's a very complicated process. But like many of our viewers may not know that envelopes like this were a relatively new invention. But how would a typical 17th century person have created and sealed a letter?
Yes, this is the art of letter locking.
Yes.
And we now know that it was an art, and that this was a thing because of Janet Ambrosio and Daniel Starcer Smith, who just published a book on letter locking, which was so much work, and they introduced people to the craft. It's, as you say, the envelope is a 19th century invention. It's such a simple concept, but before the time, people just used a sheet on which they wrote their letter, they wrote out their message, and they folded that same sheet of paper into its own sending package, into its own sending device. So you have different people folding their letters in a completely different way. So think of origami birds, and if you are an interceptor and you want to sort of intercept a lot of letters and you want to refold them because you don't want to tell that if I've spied on your letter, you want to send the letter on, you have to sort of refold that letter in exactly the same way. And that sometimes can be really difficult. And spies build in booby traps, so you couldn't really, some letters you couldn't really refold quite neatly or quite easily. And what we've just seen is the so-called spiral lock, that kind of dagger shape, that little black dagger is folded through the letter package, which could be as much, if you fold your letter, you're dealing with almost 16 to 30 pieces of paper, and that little strap needs to be woven through that letter packet, and it can break so easily, even when folding it. But if you open it, it's very hard to repair if you are a spy and want to send it on. You have your fish clue, but really it's so easy just to ruin the entire letter. So the spies, on the other hand, would know that their information would have been compromised.
And again, this is not easy. There was one of during the Civil War, one of the parliamentary counter-espionage agents was basically called a butcher because he was so bad at opening letters neatly and closing them. It was just like, I mean, they just thought he was a brilliant linguist. He could do wonderful things. He could look at writing and say, I know who's written that, but he couldn't actually open a letter without destroying it.
Yes, this is Isaac Dorislaus, known as the junior, known as the butcher of letters. So he could do other things. They wanted him to translate stuff, but if it could be avoided, he wasn't in charge of refolding these packages.
What a nickname. Ah, um, that's just, it's lovely to have those images. Thank you for sharing them with us. And I think you did, as you mentioned earlier, you did a lot of hands-on research and experimentation during your work for SPYCRAFT. What other sorts of experiments did you do?
What other experiments did we do?
we did a lot of invisible ink. We did a lot of breaking of cipher codes, but also forging seals. That's another thing you sort of stumble upon in history books, and then he forged the seal, and I thought, I actually have no idea how to do that. So we started looking in the books of the period, and there's this European bestseller which sort of explains it by Giambattista della Porta, and it's casting a seal with something called gypsum. But it takes a long time to dry, and spies were complaining, and so they also experimented with things we wouldn't do ourselves, because these things are highly toxic, with mercury, to create a fake seal.
So and we have one intelligencer in the late 16th century who is quite plainly,
and also early 17th century.
Early 17th. He's quite plainly poisoning himself while he's trying to work out how to make this metal that is a paste but hardens really quickly. And what he actually seems to have created is the dental amalgam that we used to use, which has mercury in it. So, but he complains in a letter. He's saying, I was working on my sealing metal yesterday, but now my eye is swollen up so much I can't see anything, so I'm not going to come and see you. Or now my hand is shaking so much that I'm useless. So he's actually poisoning himself by experimenting on these things, because the recipe books, the Della Porta book was Natural Magic. Yes, it had kind of recipes in it, but basically it said you take some of this and some of that, and your job's done. But of course, it doesn't give you any quantities really. It doesn't give you the process. So the people you had to work out for yourself how to actually do it, and that was really quite hard and obviously quite dangerous.
Yeah. Wow. So we worked with people from MIT in Boston to actually figure out how to forge the seal. So it was quite a complicated process, but we were quite happy in the end that it worked. And so we now give that recipe to others as well, so you can forge your seal if necessary.
Not the mercury recipes. We don't
not the mercury. No, no, only the safe bits.
Wow, got some skills. Yeah, that's great. And disguise was sometimes important for intelligencers. What kind of disguises would some of them adopt? I mean, we have an image now from the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it's the Vanity of Women, Masks and Bustles. And this is attributed to Martin van der Vos, circa 1600. Would they wear such things like?
Well, yes, they disguised everything. I mean, they used fake names, they used fake addresses, they used fake handwriting, so that they would change their handwriting to make it look more like a woman's handwriting, so it's less likely to be opened. They'd use dead drops. They would sometimes use masks like that. There's a point when the Babington plot is falling apart where one of them says, we must be careful because we'll too easily spot it by our clothing. So look, you wear my cloak, I'll wear his. You turn yours inside out, and they're just trying to make it look like they look like different people. There's certainly some instances we know of where men dressed as women,
especially in the Stuart period. We have a lot of men escaping from the Tower as women. So there's a lot of cross-dressing going on, and then they just gently walked out of the Tower. So yeah, cross-dressing.
They had when the Jesuits were smuggled into England, they realized quite quickly that they were quite obviously Jesuits, so they started giving them clothing so that they fitted in more easily with the general population. Unfortunately, they did it too well, because what started happening, there's one report where a guy says, "Oh, I've arrested a Jesuit who was trying to come in." He was so obviously a Jesuit because he wears what they always wear when they're trying to look like normal Englishmen.
This definitely didn't work out in that case. I was very interested in all the topics, but perhaps in particular, chapter 5, stilettos and storytelling, particularly the poison ring. What kind of poisons would be used, and would it have been common for a spy to possess poison, or was this a rare item?
I think it was quite rare, though it depends on which country you are in modern Europe. The Phoenicians, for instance, had a kind of secret service in which it regularly occurred that people were assassinated. It was rarer in England. A lot of plots were just invented and didn't really happen. Though the fear for poison was great, and that was certainly what was exploited as well. But poisons came in three categories: vegetable poisons, animal poisons, and minerals.
That's true. So with the animals, you had viper. Viper was very common. People use viper's blood because they thought that was poisonous. We have reports of people using toads. Of actually, there's one guy who says this is how you use the toad. You can put a toad in a sack of salt and heat the sack up, and it'll stress the toad and it'll sweat out all the poison. Then use the salt in somebody's food and it'll poison them, which it actually would. How many toads you'd need to kill somebody is another matter entirely.
Wow.
It depends on the toad, I suppose. And there's another thing called Cantharoides, which are a blister beetle, which also is Spanish fly, known as Spanish fly, which is incredibly, it blisters the flesh. So if you put that in somebody, crush them up and put that in somebody's food, their stomach it's incredibly bad for you, very, very poisonous. So that was something that you could use, again, as if it was pepper or salt. You could just sprinkle it on somebody's food. Vegetable poisons were used, like wolfsbane, hemlock, mandrake, all this kind of stuff was used. And mineral poisons, arsenic, sublimated mercury was popular way of getting rid of your enemies in that respect. Yeah. And most of these were actually not that hard to get hold of, because you could go to an apothecary and get hold of pretty much anything, because all of these things had kind of therapeutic uses.
Right.
Some of which were legitimate, many of which weren't. But it wasn't necessarily that difficult to get hold of them. But you do find people being told, here's a recipe to make a poison, but go to 4 different apothecaries, because if you buy them all at one apothecaries, they'll know exactly what you're buying and what you're doing.
I see.
It's that kind of thing in the poison.
Wow. Wow. Very it's quite, it's also a little macabre in my opinion, some of the things, that.
But the great thing about using poison, I can imagine these were not the things we would try, but you don't have to be in the same room as your victim. So before that time, when it started with stilettos, that that is up close and personal, and you probably wouldn't survive, because if you're aiming at killing a head of state, that person is also well protected, and even though you might succeed in killing that person, you would also be killed yourself. With poison, on the other hand, you don't have to be there. You can just be somewhere else entirely.
It's also very democratizing, because you don't need the level of skill or bravery to poison somebody as you do to kill them with a stiletto or shoot them with a gun. Training, and you need some bravery to do that. And you also need to know how to use the instrument. There's the recent Three Musketeers that was on BBC. I don't know whether you've seen it. There's one scene where Milady kills somebody with a stiletto, and she slices his throat. Which is not how you use it. It wouldn't work. I mean, for starters, you would not be able to slash someone's throat with a stiletto, because it wouldn't be sharp enough on the edges. It's a pointy weapon. It's a pointy weapon for stabbing, not for slashing. So you need to know how to use your weapons.
Right. Well, I guess most people wouldn't know that, but it's definitely worth the
And
maybe
of
film
course,
department looking into.
of course, My Lady the Winter was based on Lucy Carlyle, one of the great she intelligences of the period. And Lucy Carlyle would know absolutely how to use a stiletto or how not.
Yes, yes, indeed. Um, I would like to know how you worked on something like SPYCRAFT together. Do you work on it side by side, or do you go off and do your own thing and come back and go over it together?
With
Or how does it?
stilettos drawn.
The SPYCRAFT is started from pure enjoyment. The kind of love for the subject. We found that we were discussing it anyway so often. And at some point, we just clicked over a laptop and started writing down our discussions. And it was very much written side by side.
Right.
And fighting over that one laptop and giving it to each other and rewriting bits and going off on archival trips together and just having a lot of fun. And we hope that comes across in the book as well.
It was great fun, yeah.
Oh yes, it's really, you could tell that you both love the subjects that you discuss, that you cover, and it's lovely. It's nice to know how you went about that. So I know you're a musician, Pete. Do either of you listen to music when you write or edit? If so, what genres or not?
I generally not myself, because when I listen to music, I don't listen passively. So if I'm listening to something, especially with vocals, then it's difficult for me to separate what I'm looking at on the page and what I'm hearing. So I generally do it in relative silence. Though if you're writing fiction, sometimes what I would do is I would use music to set a kind of atmosphere. So you could, I mean, for just think off the top of my head, you could use Palestrina if you were writing something in a monastery, because it just has that kind of, because obviously it's monks singing, right?
Yeah.
So that's actually, but it gets you into that kind of headspace. Or if you get some very serious rock music, you can do that for a battle, because it's the same kind of thing. It's just you get that kind of chaotic, frenetic, loud stuff going on. It gets your adrenaline pumping. So that kind of thing can work for setting an atmosphere. But if I'm really concentrating on words, it just has to be quiet.
Right.
Yeah, and I can't work with music at all, so it has to be completely silent for me most of the times, and that is, of course, difficult.
Right. Wow. That's interesting. Nadine, you are not only the editor of the 3-volumed The Correspondence of Elizabeth Stuart, which is amazing. That must have taken you a long time to do too. It's incredible. Wow. But you also wrote a biography of her, which is considered to be the definitive work, and I have it here. And it is a heavy volume, isn't it? It's very nice, substantial.
It's because of the paper, I think, that they've used such a high quality paper. And again, it has so many colored images, so I think they did it to bring out all the beautiful portraits.
And also be used for assassination purposes.
Yeah.
Yes. So here we have it, and it's lovely. Very nice portrait used here in the front. There you go. So we've covered Elizabeth a fair bit with our previous guests on the show, but I'd love to know what it was about her story in particular which fascinated you and compelled you to investigate her life. I know quite early on you did have an interest in her already, but you know, to undertake a biography is no mean feat. So it'd be interesting to know.
Yes, and especially looking back now, it's done. And it was complicated to write a biography of someone who's so involved, not only in the 30 Years' War, but also in the 80 Years' War and the wars of the Three Kingdoms and Danish and Swedish wars. So it is a very complicated life story. But I think it is a story. It needed to be told because a lot of people don't know anything about her. She's the forgotten Stuart. You can easily see how her letters are being archived in the National Archives, for instance. When she's in England until 1613, until she marries the German prince, those letters are restricted access, because then she is seen as British. As soon as she marries, those letters can be called up without restriction. So it's this kind of split personality that people sort of seem to have forgotten about her because she left for the continent. During the Stuart period, she was absolutely crucial for so many people. They really saw, whenever there was a crisis, they saw her as the alternative queen. So whenever it started with James already, but it's continued under Charles, even up to Charles I, even up all the way to Charles II, who was also a bit intimidated by his aunt, and therefore didn't invite her to the coronation, because he was afraid that she might have been much more popular, and he probably was right.
There is one point where the Spanish ambassador is saying to James that there's basically been this rumor that this is during the when Charles is in Spain, during the, I can't remember what it's called now because my brain is,
the Spanish
thank
match.
you, the Spanish match, and there's this rumor that they're going to kidnap Charles and hold him to ransom, and they say to James, what do you think of that? And James said, well, if they do that, I'll just abdicate and put my daughter on the throne. They don't want that. And they really wouldn't have wanted that either.
Wow. So she is such a Protestant icon, but you have Catholic Scots fighting for her because they see her as the Stuart princess.
Right.
So she was such a charismatic person, and for a woman writing letters that are so politically important and using so many cipher codes, and she writes in French and in Italian and in English, and so much of her letters were not known before. And then having collected her letters from, I think, about 50 different locations in Europe and the United States, and that took me about 20 years. I could not but also write the biography.
Wow. Well, that's dedication. That's wonderful, and it's brilliant. So well done. Pete, you were the editor of the 2016 book, Negotiating the Jacobean Printed Book. For those new to the history of the 17th century and the Jacobean period, what are some of the most important printed works to have been published during this time? And do you have a favorite from the period?
I think for me, this is kind of what Negotiating the Jacobean Printed Book was all about. It was about the James's attempts, mostly successful, to assert his authority as king and his authority as an intellectual. And so we have the authorized Bible that he commissioned, which is wildly important, which talks at length at the beginning about the king's voice, and when the king's voice is still the king's voice, even though it's translated. It's because God's voice is still God's voice, even if it's translated. And we've got his works that come out in 1616, alongside Ben Jonson's works. He publishes his own works. He's the first person to publish. These are my collected works, as opposed to somebody publishing somebody else's collected works. So James does that. Johnson does that. Bacon's Instauratio Magna comes out a few years later, and this is all of these incredibly important works about the nature of authority and who's in charge, and where knowledge comes from, and where the monarchy comes from, really, and also where authors come from, because Johnson is asserting his authorship. He's the first person who really says, I am an original author. I am writing stuff that nobody else has written. Other people say this about other people. He's the first person who says it himself. So that's really quite important, and that's one of the things that goes through this period, is this obsession with authority, which of course stems back to the whole slightly shady way that James ended up on the throne, because no one really kind of knows how it happened. It just kind of did. Lots of people were plotting against each other. Lots of things going on. People were promising all sorts of things. Cecil was going up to Scotland talking to James while Elizabeth was dying. But it's that there are also kind of fears. And going back to the Gunpowder Plot, of course, part of the Gunpowder Plot, which people always forget, is that it was a kind of an anti-Scottish thing. So it was more than just a Protestant Catholic thing. It was also kind of anti-Scottish. So you've got this whole problem of the authority of the monarchy, which of course becomes quite serious later on in the century
Right.
when they chop Charles's head off.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. Pretty bad. You divide your time between the Netherlands and the United Kingdom. Have you noticed if there's more of an interest in the history of the 17th century in either of these countries?
Well, I think the Tudors have dominated so much in England, but
Yes.
it's beginning to change. You have all these wonderful new biographies being published at the moment about King James. So I
Yeah.
think it is changing a bit, and people sort of realize that the Stuarts might just be as important as the Tudors, if not much more interesting. So
Yes.
it's slowly changing, I think.
I think in the Netherlands it's the other way around, though, isn't it? The Netherlands are much more interested in the Stuarts because they had so many of them there.
Yes, and of course, yeah, they lived. Elizabeth Stuart, the Queen of Bohemia, lived in The Hague for about 40 years. So they're very
Yes.
much interested in that shared Anglo-Dutch history.
And that was
Yes.
where the kind of king came
Yes,
from,
yes,
the Stuart period. So.
during the Glorious Revolution.
Yes. I mean, I had to go for my own research to Amsterdam and Hetlo, and I just found there was a great appreciation for it, and I just got more of a sense of more of that. You know, it was more the history was appreciated a bit more, and more people knew about it from where I was during my travels. And so I just thought if that was still like that. But yeah, it's interesting, and I have noticed that it has the period is getting more attention, which I think is no bad thing. So yeah, let's see how it goes in the future. Um, but I'd love to know if you have any advice for those in our audience who perhaps would like to be historians someday.
Just be passionate about it, and then very practical thing: learn secretary scripts, and don't trust old editions. If you can, go back to the original documents. And I think we now in this age of AI, where AI can start to do things for us, we still need a lot of people who can check transcriptions. But because the meaning of entire documents can change with a single word, so learning to work with manuscripts is absolutely essential.
And so many things are mistranscribed, just tiny little transcriptions that are wrong and completely changed your reading. As Nadine says, you're reading the document. So there was one you found which had been transcribed as Mr. but actually was Mrs. And it's like, this now completely changes the way you read this. So learn how to read this stuff yourself. The AI thing is very interesting because, of course, AI is making great advances in transcribing letters in secretary hand. But the problem that it has is that it can't do the difficult words. And they're the ones that you need to know, because the easy words are kind of easy. So you need to have humans still doing it. So you need to learn this thing and get down and read it. And the difference in the difference in access that we have now to these documents than we had say 25 years ago is just night and day.
And I think SPYCRAFT is a book that is very much an example in that respect, because it allowed us, because of the Cecil papers online and the state papers online, we saw the documents in the archives, but because of that also digital access, we could return to a document again and again and again. And for code breaking, that's absolutely essential, and to get the proper transcriptions. So my respect for historians of the past who only had their 1 or 2 weeks. You can now work in a completely different way just by that having continuous access.
And also you can suddenly recognize something and go, just a minute, doesn't this look like that thing we looked at 6 months ago? And you can go back to it and you can find it really easily, which is very difficult to do before then.
Yeah.
Yes.
For now.
I agree. It makes things so much easier when you do have access anytime.
Yes, and of
But
course, not all people
yeah,
do. Not all people do
no,
it. So,
no.
so we're still working from a privileged position here.
Yes, but like with public libraries, I've had to use public libraries and get access that way,
Yeah.
because I'm independent, so I'm not affiliated with any institution. So those in that kind of position, yes, you can get access via your public library, and thank goodness for that. Um, but I think, in short, there are no shortcuts. So we can use AI, but you got to get in there and do the work,
Yeah.
and get to the primary sources and read them for yourselves and try to take the time and understand what's before you for yourself, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Great. um, I this is on a tangent here, going way off. But having read your Amazon author profiles, I gather there was a desire to have a cat, and I'd love to know: did you ever get one?
No, no, unfortunately not. And it's still one of my biggest.
Oh,
Yeah, I would love to have a cat, but
yes,
because of the all the archival trips,
yes.
poor beast would be alone,
Oh,
or
yeah,
so we can't have cats.
yeah. All
But
right.
it's
Did,
well, who knows?
yeah.
Whenever perhaps I should start working with printed sources only, so I don't have to travel so much.
Right. Um, and yeah, because when we went to Amsterdam, when we went to the Netherlands, we had to keep our cat here. We were living in Lancashire, so the neighbors had to look after them for after her for a while. But yes, I understand. Well, I hope you do get a cat someday. That would be lovely. Um, so I like to end our chats with a Fantasy Stuart dinner party. And here we have a fantastic painting. It's called A Banquet by Dutch artist Dirk Halst from 1628. I'd love to know, who would you invite to your candlelit banquet? What would you serve, and who would you sit next to? So anybody from the Stuart period, from any part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, we would invite several people, right? So we can have a slightly big party. So
Great.
we would start with two early modern cues because of SPYCRAFT. So two men who invented all the SPYCRAFT machineries and little instruments. One from the beginning of the period, Arthur Gregory, who was so essential during the Gunpowder Plot, who invented that machine to copy invisible ink. And then at the other end of the period, much later, around the Restoration, we have Samuel Morland, who does similar things. So we definitely would have two inventors, as well as a Stuart spy master. Thomas Scott is not as well known as John Thurlow, but he was basically the one who made the Secret Service much more professional during that period. And he also got his intelligence from a brothel, the Sugarloaf. One of the things I would love to know is who were the she intelligences with whom he worked in the Sugarloaf in London. And then we have some women as well.
Yeah, we thought we'd invite Diana Jennings just because she'll be so funny. I think she'd be great fun, really good value. As would Lady Carlisle, and Lady Carlisle also is very comfortable with the royalists and parliamentarians both, so she'd be able to
Yes.
keep everyone happy together. She probably should sit next to John Wilmot, the Earl of Rochester, just because that would just be amusingly obscene. And we'd also have Lucy Harrington Russell, Countess of Bedford.
Yeah, Lucy, the Countess of Bedford, is so such a key figure in this period. She's connected to authors, to John Donne, Ben Jonson, but also one of the most frequent maskers, apart from the Queen Anne of Denmark. She was on the stage constantly, and I think she with all her knowledge about cultural patronage, would be an essential figure to have and just be very entertaining. And what would we serve? We found this a more difficult question, But
Mhm.
in our local pub in the countryside in the UK, I'm
Mhm.
always ordering a Sauvignon from the brand Spy Valley just to keep on topic. And what else would we have?
We thought we'd start with Angels on Horseback in honor of Elizabeth Stuart because she was so fond of oysters.
She ate so
Oh.
many oysters that she drove up the price. So she in The Hague, and of course she grew up with the Countess of Bedford in the Harrington household. So I thought if the Elizabeth Stuart loved oysters, then the Countess of Bedford must have liked them as well.
We thought we'd serve Toad in the Hole because just to terrify people because they suddenly think that we're going to poison them with toads.
Oh, good one.
And as a kind of dessert, we would have something with chocolate or perhaps a sticky toffee pudding, but we would have a sparkler in, so to sort of have a kind of little firework moment to entertain the early modern cues and the spy master at the table.
Wow, that sounds great. And who would you sit next to?
Oh, difficult. I think I would very much want to have a conversation with Lady Carlisle. I'm not
Mhm.
sure whether I dare to sit next to the Earl of Rochester, though.
Yeah.
What I try and do is instigate a thing where we move around for each course so we can sit next to everybody.
Yeah, that
Oh,
would
that's a
work.
good idea. Yeah, that's really good. Um, well, that's great. I want to thank you both for coming on the show today and joining me on my virtual salon. And it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your weekend. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This was really enjoyable.
Oh, thank you. Likewise. Take care. Well, that's that was Nadine and Pete. Um, I would like to say thank you to everyone who has been um, sending messages online. I really appreciate all the support that you've given to the show, and it's lovely. You can follow both of our guests on social media. Nadine is at Miss Walsingham, and Pete is at Elegant Fowl, and there are links to their websites under this video on YouTube. So next month we will have um, my my friend Dr. Erica Canella, who is also one of the Stuart History Festival co-organizers, and she'll be with us to talk about her upcoming book, Zealous. So we're going to talk about that and the Puritans of the Stuart period and Quakers. And so there's a lot in store for next month. So do join us then. And until then, don't forget to keep it Stuart.